speaking of a game where we were watching the over-under and over-bettors got to rejoice, Garrett, I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
mean to pat myself on the back, but we had a bounce-back week in the ledger. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, later on in the week. But Alabama knocks off Tennessee. Crimson Tide, 11th ranked in the country coming in. Tennessee, number 17. They were off a win over Texas A&M at home. Tennessee jumped out to a big lead, 17-7, punched Alabama in the mouth. I think it was 20-7 at the break. And then Alabama scored 27 unanswered points and came back to win this game at home. For me, the storylines were twofold. Number one, once again, the moment you count Nick Saban out, whether it's in the media, whether it's in a game at halftime, he comes back and he crushes your soul. Secondly, for Tennessee, letting Alabama off the mat makes me believe that they are still at least a year or two away from even threatening the SEC East crown. React to each of those. Which do you want to tackle first?
Well, I mean, in terms of them being a year away or more, I think that's probably fair. I think what they had last year with Hendon Hooker, with Jalen Hyatt, with that whole crew was special. And you see that sometimes. You get a new head coach with the right, perfect mix of players, and it's special. And that can happen. I mean, think about Louisville with Lamar Jackson. Think about A&M with Johnny Manziel, right? You have that one quarterback who's just a little bit more special. You can do something really, really cool. But when that guy leaves and you don't have that next level talent, that next level playmaking, you start to say, okay, well, what can we really do? And I think it's time to kind of batten down the hatches and say, we got to get serious, because if you're Tennessee, you don't have that elite pass game that you were counting on. You've had to rush the ball a lot this year. You've been fairly effective. But, I mean, today, you look at the stats, it looks like they should have beat them, right? They outgained them in total yards, barely got outrushed. They were better in the pass game. So you look at some of these stats, they're better on third down, 8-18 on third down. They converted their third downs at a good margin. But that 0 for 3 on fourth down, it's the situational stuff, right? It's just having that level of experience to know when you need the play, what you can do, setting up better fourth downs so that you can convert those, or just playing for the point sometimes, right? Just playing for the field position sometimes. I understand it, right? Sometimes stuff happens. You get in a weird game situation. But for me, that's really where this comes and breaks down is Tennessee didn't play the good situational spots. They played great in the first half. They scored 0 points in the second half. They didn't score
Yeah.
a point in the second half. You can't
No.
do that against Alabama. I don't care how down they are. I don't care if, we're not convinced that Jalen Milroe's an elite passer, and I'm still not convinced he's an elite passer. He's not there. It doesn't matter if he's not that guy. You can't score 0 points in Tuscaloosa and still expect to win. They got some room to grow. They got some room to make some improvements. And I think without some massive influx of transfer portal talent, which of course could happen, it's still a little further away than Tennessee fans probably want it to be.
I think that is a big takeaway from this is kind of a gut check time, right? Like you go up big over your rival on the road. Now that's much harder than holding the lead at home. I'll give you that, but to come out, lay an egg, the defense looked completely flat coming out of halftime. They allow a big touchdown pass right out of the break. Alabama immediately gets the counter punch after sucking on the orange slices, right? And it felt like the Tide were off and running from that point. Now, to Tennessee's credit, they got Squirrel White going this week, 111 yards receiving on 10 catches, a touchdown. I pointed him out. He had to be an X factor for Tennessee to even have a chance in this game. They had more than a chance. They could have won this game outright. They could have knocked off the Tide, beaten their rival on the third Saturday in October, 2 years running. But Josh Heupel in that offense, again, they prove that time and time again, if you can get to the quarterback, if you can take away what their simple bread and butter is, then he doesn't really have an answer. And
Yep.
Joe Milton did not have necessarily a bad game, although the sack, the fumble, the scoop and score at the end was the nail in the coffin. But Joe Milton to me just isn't the difference maker, the X factor that certainly a quarterback at a top 15, a top 10 level has to be. And if you're going to beat your rival on the road, you have to bring some of those X factor qualities to the game. last thing on Alabama for me, look, big win, gut check time. You came in and took this one away. The offensive line still has so many issues, though. You give up 4 sacks, several more tackles for loss. The first half, they got bullied, and we're just so not used to seeing that on a regular basis from Alabama. But credit to the Tide. They kind of lose the first half. They've lost the first half somewhat regularly this season, but other than the Texas game, they come out, they adjust, they win the second half, they win the game. With that in mind, is Alabama a legitimate playoff contender based on what you've seen on the field?
In terms of making the playoff, yes. In terms of doing anything in the playoff, I'm going to say no, specifically because of what you just pointed out, the offensive line. I don't think there's a team in the SEC West that can take advantage of that. I don't think that there's a team left on the schedule or not that can take advantage of how bad that offensive line has played. LSU doesn't have a defense, right? I mean, they shut out Army, congrats. But, they don't have much of a defense to show for. If they start playing better all of a sudden, maybe that changes. But when you break down what their offensive line looks like, when you break down some of the weaknesses, I just don't think that they can go the distance. They could certainly beat Georgia if Georgia's offense doesn't get rolling, right? This could be like a defensive slugfest, and that could be a low-scoring SEC championship game. And so they could make the playoff, but I don't think if they were to go up against a, Ohio State, a Michigan, even what we saw out of Florida State at the end of the game, tonight, if they go up against any of those teams with some of those high-powered defenses that can really get after the quarterback, that can really make life a nightmare, I don't think that they're going to be able to move the ball against any of those teams, right? There's probably, another team that I'm missing somewhere in there, and Washington, maybe not maybe the most elite defense. If Oregon makes it, I think Oregon's got a better defense overall. But there's still just some teams across the country I don't think Alabama can score against. And that's ultimately what's going to hold them back. I think that they don't have a good enough quarterback to overcome the poor offensive line play. And so unless things get better, it's going to be problems in T-Town.
I cannot wait to see how Alabama ultimately rides to the end of the season. It feels like they're on the precipice, man. It feels like there's a chance that they can do something kind of great, write a cool story here.
Yeah.
They were counted out. Nick Saban gets the ultimate last laugh by proving everybody wrong. At the same time, boy, this team has some flaws. And I feel like to win at the top level, you got to have those flaws ironed out. Well, I don't know if Alabama has that right now.
Let's go back to the very beginning of the season with Alabama. If you go back to the beginning of the season and you look at how they lost the Texas game and you look at how they struggled against, South Florida and how some of these games really didn't go their way, I think you have to credit, and again, this isn't a shocking thing, but credit Nick Saban for sticking with the team and proving once again that he can make something good out of his team. He's taken Milroe leaps and bounds from where he was beginning of the season. Milroe's still not elite. He's still not Tua. He's still not Bryce. He's still not any of those guys. But he's made massive strides. They have a receiver in Jermaine Burton who can finally play. They've got a running game that's more established with Chase McClellan. And, that's really, really good. Is he going to fix the offensive line? Maybe. He could do that by the end of the season. You give him a couple more weeks to, figure some stuff out, spend a little bit more time with the unit. You could figure some stuff out and watch this Bama team hit their stride into the season, week 10, week 11, start playing that elite level of Alabama football that we're used to. And then we're all just sitting here like, why did I doubt Nick Saban? Why did I doubt that this guy was going to do it again? And I was such an idiot for doubting Nick Saban was going to be able to do this again. It's on the table.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It absolutely is.
Gracious, yeah.